Dear human being, beloved soul, I welcome you to my podcast series, Conversations with the Universe. After a near-death experience, my perception of our human existence changed profoundly. I became more sensitive, with all our known senses. I feel more intensely, see people with different eyes, and often take a different perspective on life and our challenges. In my books, I share these altered perspectives and all the knowledge that has flowed through me since my near death and thus record it. For all those who are searching for something more, for the meaning of our existence here on Mother Earth. And it is now a great pleasure for me to share this knowledge with you in this way as a supplement to my books. This season I am dedicating myself to my very first work, the basics of being. I wish you many wonderful insights on your path. Thank you. Love.
Dear human, beloved soul, people have always known about the trinity of body, soul, and spirit. The body is the animal that houses you. It is the shell that forms the organism that enables you to live on this planet. The soul, on the other hand, is the energy that you are. And this energy has a consciousness that is called the spirit. This energy is large enough to have sufficient consciousness for incarnation in a human body. In this respect, it would be more correct if we were to call the human being the following: animal plus energy with consciousness, spirit. A human being consists of a sufficient mass of energy to develop consciousness, but a certain frequency is also required for this process. Energy is closely linked to consciousness because a high vibrating, fine energy has a high level of consciousness. So consciousness is always a question of energy and a question of frequency, because the higher the frequency of a level, the finer, clearer, and broader the consciousness. Power is a measure of energy. In the higher, more subtle levels, energy is at its clearest and undisturbed by the low frequencies of an organism, as well as by earthly magnetic fields or the laws of nature that affect soul energy in matter. There, in the subtle levels, consciousness is also clearer and stronger. Incarnation means contamination of energy. Consciousness is energy. Since all energy moves out from the center and back to it again, consciousness also follows this principle. At the outermost edge of the spiral, our coarse material matter arises. There the energy is slowest, and thus the consciousness is most immobile. It is important to rediscover this mobility, and this process constitutes the creator in us. The danger of earthly existence is to get caught in a vicious circle of weakness, which at the same time obscures our consciousness. Hence the call of all teachers of this and other worlds to regain themselves and their own strength through so-called purification rituals. This process is a decisive step towards dissolving the fog, because once you are aware of yourself, you attain a basic energy from which the ego can direct the power so that it is no longer lost. The density of coarse material impairs the energies, and that in turn costs strength. But if a person finds their way back to their true strength through the purification process, they come into closer contact with their own inner energy, and that is where awareness begins. Finding yourself again purifies and clarifies your view of life and makes you more knowing and trusting of the cosmic laws that surround you. Energy is therefore directly related to knowledge through the power of consciousness. The purer your body, the more powerful your innermost being becomes. And with that, more and more cosmic knowledge can reach you. You get all the more access to your actual knowledge, to your realization of who you really are and how everything is connected. Every increase in the energy of your soul, energy within you consequently always brings with it an increase in your level of knowledge. The less energy you have available, the less you can understand who you really are. The more you live in an illusion, in a delusion. It is no coincidence that, for example, places of power around the world have a mind-expanding effect on the people who visit them. The reason for this is the energy of the place, which has a partly cleansing, partly perception-altering effect on us, and thus on our consciousness. Energy is the engine of your consciousness. Energy is in motion. Consciousness is in motion. And the power behind this movement creates your destiny. From the center, it is curiosity that moves energy. Back to it, it is the yearning that drives consciousness. In an infinite sequence of defilement and purification, consciousness thus experiences its development. It is the key to paradise and hell at the same time. But to use it to enter paradise, it first requires the ignition of the divine spark. Consciousness is the divine spark within us. It is no coincidence that the Brothers Grimm wrote the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty in such a way that a person is kept away from Sleeping Beauty's sleeping realm by many, many stinging roses. The rose is a symbol of the blossoming consciousness, but without the kiss, Sleeping Beauty would also continue to sleep for all eternity. For this reason, the Mayans, the Egyptians, and actually all ancient civilizations have created ways to awaken from this twilight sleep of unconsciousness, to startle them. Because only a near-death experience is a strong enough shock to awaken precisely that which otherwise cannot be touched, and moved strongly enough by the normal experiences of life. To put it in even simpler terms, during the incarnation into an organism, consciousness needs a jolt. And it needs a huge jolt to get to the point where it begins to perceive itself. And this jolt is experienced by the person through a consciously experienced shock. Such a shock can take many different forms. It can take the form of an accident, for example, or the loss of material possessions or another person. But however your previous system is shaken, it is a switch in your life. And you should recognize it as such, accept it, and use it. What is crucial here is the strength with which you live through such a situation. A switch always offers you the opportunity to move in a new direction. But here too, you decide with your strength and the will that goes with it whether you use this switch at all. Consider and reflect deeply. What circumstances contributed to this? What was my contribution to it? What did I do wrong? Look at yourself, look at your actions, and examine them honestly and fundamentally. Then you are on a good path of self-reflection. I have often seen that people who have suffered such shocks in their lives often wallow in self-pity and despair even more than before. Their anger was always projected outwards. They only looked for the causes and reasons for what they had experienced in external circumstances, but never in themselves. Yet this is crucial when it comes to the path a person takes after a mind-expanding shock. It is not always just you alone, but you are definitely always the cause of what happens to you. Therefore, pay attention and ask yourself, how could it come to this? I would almost say that I wish every person such a shaking experience. But at the same time, I also wish you always enough strength to go through these shocks and not to fall on the path of despair, self-pity, or even more forgetting. These moments are there to give your life decisive impulses. Take them seriously and accept them as a gift so that they have the power to truly improve your life, to remind your consciousness. Be open to it and trust. Then nothing can happen to you that is not helpful on the path of becoming aware. Concentration creates attention. Attention demands devotion. Devotion transforms perception. Perception forms consciousness. But I would also like to point out that consciousness carries a very high risk of deception. It can give us the feeling of being omniscient. This means that at each of its levels, it can give you the feeling that you are already at the highest level. But that too is an illusion. Consciousness is perception. And as long as your consciousness is clouded and acting in forgetfulness, your perception is distorted, especially when it comes to the fact that it is possible on this planet to live in an illusion and not to recognize and experience the world in the reality and totality that it actually is. Because it is above all and exclusively your consciousness that creates these illusions. Consciousness is tied to your free will, because with it, you decide how you perceive things. You decide whether you see the glass as half full or half empty. You alone decide whether you experience paradise or rather hell in your life, because you create it, exclusively with your consciousness. You will experience paradise if you manage to recognize the impulses of fate, the opportunities and possibilities that present themselves to you. And this vigilance sharpens your consciousness, clarifies it, and moves it again. If this does not happen, you will not experience your life as one that you have created, but as one that has been initiated and influenced from outside. Then you feel powerless, buffeted, and pushed around by circumstances. And that is where your hell begins. You decide. You decide how you want to perceive your world and consequently create it. You decide whether the sun blinds you or whether it shines warmly on you. Only you, but it doesn't have to be that way. If every step gives you the feeling that you are already at the highest level, then the challenge to continue to develop your awareness and openness is all the stronger. But the animal in you will want to use this state differently than your mind. The animal in you tends to use this feeling to be tyrannical, dogmatic, and abusive in every way. So you will repeatedly encounter many people who present themselves as the strongest, craziest, smartest, and wisest people you have ever met. Then please don't forget that such people can only maintain this position because others believe in this illusion and bring it to life. The people nourish the power of the king and not the other way around. Therefore, it is your decision to escape this illusion and create your own image. But be careful. You should be careful never to believe that you have reached the top and final stage. You cannot achieve that because consciousness has an infinite number of stages. There will always be someone who is even more aware. Therefore, keep an open mind and respect the next level. There will always be another one. The ancient Egyptians taught the doctrine of the 22 levels of consciousness. The individual levels of power are depicted in a very vivid and easy to understand way for everyone. It is interesting to note that these 22 levels of consciousness were recognized, recorded, and taught based on a very specific perception. If perception changes, then the view of the developmental stages of consciousness also changes. And this is precisely where we are now. At that time, the frequency of the energy zone made it possible to perceive these 22 levels. Today, when the cosmic energies appear to be changing, it is possible to grasp the whole infinity of levels of consciousness. Despite all this, the Egyptians correctly recorded such a cycle of infinitely strung cycles of awareness. Before I present them to you, let the following image take effect on you. Here is the cycle of consciousness as I perceive it. Recognizing. 1. The individual awakens. Consciousness begins to perceive itself. 2. Surrender. Conscious surrender is part of the path. Forms. 3. Trinity creates matter. 4. Matter has limits. The perception of material limits sets in. 5. Reflection. Questioning one's existence begins to shape other decisions. Sharing knowledge. 6. The path of consciousness begins to take the next step. The question of meaning has been resolved, and the new search for fulfillment begins. The decision is, learn to make conscious decisions. 7. The king's power makes its entrance. Each step makes you more aware. The energy of awakening arises. 8. The new power potential brings a different perspective, more insight, and, as a result, a new responsibility. Maturation. Letting go of material things. 9. Growth means learning and moving on. This realization also makes visible that which is not part of yourself. Turning inwards. Energy of retreat. 10. The goal becomes clear. Who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go. 11. Realization that physicality is a tool for shaping consciousness. Learning to consciously perceive each other as animal and God. Experience of physicality. 12. This is where the formation of consciousness through the animal's senses begins. The experience of powerlessness and loss of control. everything has an even deeper meaning, and that holds the reins. 13. Descent into the unconscious world of experience. Darkness is part of light. The conscious journey into darkness begins. Different perspectives allow for the perception of different spaces. Different spaces enable a different consciousness. 14. Remembering the spiritual power that must not be forgotten. 15. Experiencing the shadows. Only the true integration of all worlds creates the whole. Light and shadow are expressions of one and the same. Experiencing the perception of light over darkness is part of this path. 16. Liberation. The spiritual power has been experienced through the body and now invites you to leave physicality behind. Finding balance. 17. The fountain of youth. Being aware in physicality and being aware without physicality are experienced and now brought into balance. 18. Free will challenges. Renewed reflection based on new experiences. Where does it want to go? Loving, shining, giving. 19. Reconciliation. The connection with other worlds leads to the reconciliation of the earthly and the spiritual part. The experience of the separation of the two from each other begins to transform. 20. Healing and cleansing. The consciousness attained so far can now heal parts of the soul, be cleansed itself, and then radiate in a new power. 21. Paradise rediscovered. All is known. Matter is the tool. Spirit or consciousness is the guide. Together they can create paradise. Supreme insight, completion, preparation. 22. Everything is experienced at this level. The knowledge gained calls for respectful use. Curiosity is aroused to move on to the next level. And finally, a new beginning. All knowledge that has ever been remembered on earth can only be understood, absorbed and passed on by the respective cosmic forces at work, and from the resulting level of consciousness of people. The interplay of a multitude of laws between power, frequencies, movement of energies and dependencies on each other therefore results in the following laws of consciousness. Here I share with you the rules of consciousness as I perceive them. 1. A certain part of cosmic knowledge always reaches people only at a certain earthly time. This has cosmic energetic causes. 2. Knowledge is responsibility. When the cosmic energetic circumstances change, the perception of people and thus their consciousness change. This is closely related to the responsibility that is required to implement the acquired knowledge in the material world. The more conscious a being is, the more responsible and respectful it will be in its dealings. 3. The human organism is subject to natural laws, but these too are subject to the cosmic energetic laws in their continuation. These laws are responsible for the knowledge that people have attained and how they translate, understand, and absorb it. The human being thus acts as a filter through which these energies can flow in the form of knowledge. The education of the observer, the human filter, is also crucial for how the incoming knowledge is then interpreted, formulated, and understood. For this reason, for example, our previous natural sciences are not sciences of nature, but sciences of the human interpretation of nature. 4. The dimensionality of a planet creates the perceptual possibilities of the beings that live on it. Our three-dimensional perception sets the boundaries within which knowledge can be understood. Another planet creates different conditions. Other physicalities can also produce other senses and thus perceive the same information quite differently. Four-dimensionality allows four-dimensional perception, etc. 5. Everything you find written down from the past was valid for the time and the consciousness of that time, for the filter of that person and society, for the education and belief system in which that person was embedded. 6. Therefore, always keep an open mind and be curious enough not to recognize this ancient knowledge as the only valid and correct one, but pay attention to the interpretations of the time. And if you have impulses to see certain things differently, then follow them and give them space. 7. Because the knowledge of the universe is so all-encompassing that we can only ever understand and truly absorb a piece of it. The knowledge communicated so far is one part of it, but what you receive today is another part, another level. 8. There are no limits and anything is possible, only with consciousness. Consciousness can be expanded and stretched to infinity. 9. The energy within us uses the different forms of expression of matter to shape consciousness and to experience knowledge through physicality. Consciousness is the key to how experiences are absorbed, processed, and understood. 10. Only the realization of all being in all forms, in all possibilities and frequency ranges, means experiencing the wholeness of being. It is not just about knowing, but about becoming the knowledge. Then you are whole, because your consciousness permeates all being. Carpe Vitam. Thank you very much for listening, and I would like to remind you to join our community Spine. We are a community that wants to help you live a healthier life, practice your spirituality, and expand your consciousness. We help you find and connect with healers around the world, and we help you give your life a new meaning in different ways. We are Spine, connections that help.